Hello, 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 everybody. I am Rosalind Brown of Your Wealth Guidance, where we help Black women create their financial independence map and identify the tools for success so you can live life on your own terms. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future Money Mondays, although it's Thursday. Want to thank you so much for being with us today. And as you know, if you've been here for any amount of time, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. So when we start talking about estate planning, we're always talking about building wealth and having that financial independence. But there are so many things that happen. There are so many what ifs, but the one thing that is definite is you gonna go. And the second thing is that people around you are going to pass as well. And so sometimes it's not just them passing, it is people around you that pass, and that has a tremendous impact on your wealth, your ability to gain wealth and grow your wealth. But it could also have a tremendous ability on the safety and security of what you have and what you've built. And so we hear so much talking about like their side hustles and building these businesses and building these brands. But also, if we're going to have any type of generational wealth, it's so important for us to have these things in order too. So we have Veronica McClendon. She's been with us before, so I hope y'all remember chatting with her and talking a lot about getting your estate in order and what that can actually mean, especially later on when we start to talk about what funds are in place, what funds are available for like nursing homes and so forth to go after, the look back periods and all those kind of things. But she is an estate planning and real estate attorney who specializes in helping individuals and families manage, preserve, and transfer assets that were inherited or acquired during their own lifetimes. She provides legal services in a personal and inviting manner. Through her company, McClendon Law and Consulting, she offers service to include drafting wills and estate plans, consulting with families on clearing title to heir property, and LLC and other business entity formations. And definitely, if you're a family from the South, more than likely y'all understand how important, like they talk about getting land. And there's tons of heir property, definitely in the South where I'm from. But Veronica, tell us a little bit in terms of like what you're seeing. What are some of the bigger things that people are missing or not even thinking about as they're either growing their business or even just growing their wealth overall?
Yes, thank you, Rosalind. And I am so excited to be here with everyone again for this particular segment. As a presenter, definitely try to peek in here and there when I can for other speakers. But it's just a privilege to be here again. I do want to say, like, I love comments. I love feedback and participation. So if you have comments or questions, please feel free to put those in the chat because I love to respond directly to what people are wanting to know. But in terms of things that people tend to avoid or they don't really get around to, especially as business owners, it's just thinking about the long term plan, the long range view, as I like to call it. So people are excited, they have a skill or a service or a product that they're excited to offer, and they go out, they get their LLC, they get their bank account, and they're up there, they got a laptop and they're in business, they're ready to go. But a lot of people don't sit down and think about what is my end result. What end result do I have in mind? What goal do I have in mind with this business? And not just right now, like I want to be able to replace my income, or I want to be able to provide these excellent services in a way that I've never seen them offer. Those are great things, but what impact do you hope your business will have in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and even after you're gone? And so that's something I think a lot of business owners fail to think about. They get caught in the day to day, I'm just trying to operate this business and keep it going, but they don't think what happens to the business after I'm gone.
Now, when is it the time to think about this? Is it, when you're setting up the LLC? Is it when you've made some money, when you got some assets? Like when does it make sense? Because I know people are always like, okay, I'm gonna take care of that later. But
Mm-hmm.
how far is later?
So I encourage people to start thinking about that when they first launch the business. My daughter goes to a school where they study the 7 habits of highly successful people. They call it the Leader in Me program. But number two, the second habit, whether you're a child or an adult, is to begin with the end in mind. And so when you begin your business, you should be thinking, what do I want? What impact do I want this to have in the future? And so there are some things that everyone can start doing at the beginning, regardless of how far along you are. Just even sitting down and thinking, again, what impact do I hope to have with this business? Do I have children? Do I have a spouse? Do I have nieces and nephews? Is it the kids in my neighborhood? Who am I doing this for? Really sitting down and thinking about that. And it could be that you're just doing it for yourself, which there's no problem with that. But if you can think about yourself and also think about people who are going to come after you, then you have a way of leaving a little bit more behind after you're gone. And so I encourage business owners, think about the future when you begin your business so that you can build things in place, put things in place with that in mind. And so one of the things that business owners often fail to do is think about building a business that they can sell in the future, or that someone would want to inherit, or that someone would want to buy if it's not directly from the business owner but from their estate. Putting those systems in place from the beginning, putting the infrastructure in place, making sure that your legal documents are sound. I had someone come to me today. I was at a women's conference, and a women in business conference, and someone came up to me and said, I'm launching my business and I want to make sure I have certain things in place before I get too far. And I do think that there's a good, that sometimes that could be used as a way to stall you and to keep you from actually taking that step. But it's also good to be thinking, what am I going to be putting out there in the world, and what protections do I need to put in place? Because I hate seeing when people's business ideas are stolen. I hate seeing when the business was awesome, but the infrastructure was weak, and so the business didn't last very long. And so, it's when you're doing this long range business planning, business succession planning, who's going to take it after me? What impact do I want to leave? It's also helping you in the short term to make sure that you have a profitable, legally sound, firm foundation for your business.
Now, I think that's a good point. You talked about selling your business. And so some people are like, I'm only creating this. So I'm going to, grind real hard for 5 years. This is going to be worth a whole bunch of money. We hear about people selling their business for millions of dollars and then they're sitting on the beach. What are some of the things that maybe prevent people from being able to really put a lot of time and energy into a business for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and then sell it and actually retire off of those funds? What are some of those things that, because I think people think about, of course, when they pass away, but there's a lot of people that are saying, I have a great idea. I'm going to scale it. And then someone else is going to take that idea and run with it. Or, one of these big tech companies might buy it or whatever that might be.
Yeah, and I think that's what estate planning is all about. While you're here building, growing, and strengthening that foundation, so that either when you retire or when you're gone, you have something of value that you've created that can then be passed on to someone else. And so we can make an impact on the world. Um, oh goodness, I was gonna tie it into your question, and then the thought just came out. Do you remember your question?
Yeah, because especially as people are thinking about, they don't want to create this business that they're going to have for generations and generations. They're thinking, I'm creating some great idea that somebody is going to come out and buy maybe 5 years from now, maybe one of these big tech companies or what have you. What are some of those things? Because some people are thinking that they want 100-year-old company. They want to create something that they can scale and then sell to someone else.
Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of building something that someone else would want to take on. You're gonna need to have the systems in place. Excuse me. Have the systems in place. The how do we do business? Write that down. Make sure it's clear who does what. Not necessarily the person, but the role. When we start businesses, a lot of times we do everything. But what we have to do is think about what different roles am I filling, and make sure that we're being mindful of the roles that we are filling, and then creating operating procedures for those individual roles. So we want to make sure we have our systems in place. We want to make sure we have people in place, because you're not going to be able to scale your business or get it to a place where it's really sustainable unless you know how to delegate, unless you put other people in place to be there when you're not able to be there. I was very grateful today to be able to be away for a conference for the whole work day. And then when I came back to my desk for just a few minutes, stuff had gotten done while I was gone. And it's not possible if we're doing it on our own. So we want to make sure that we put that in place, because nobody wants to inherit or buy a mess. They don't want to buy chaos. They want to buy a neat little package that they can now implement in what they're doing already. And so making sure we have those things in place, making sure that we have the foundational things for the business. If you operate an LLC and you intend on growing, you need to have an operating agreement. And that operating agreement spells out what happens to the business if something happens to you. Can someone buy you out? What would be the terms upon which they buy you out? Especially if you're in a partnership, or if there's a team of you going into business together. You want to have the rules clear. If something happened to one of the team members, or they decided they don't want to be part of it anymore, what are the rules for making sure that their interest is properly transferred to someone else? If they die, do their heirs just get to be your new business partners? Or do you want to have it where there's an immediate buyout provision that I can buy out my partner if something happens to them? And then where you get the money for that? Making sure that you have insurance in place for the business owner. So if something happened to them, they die. But also, if they become disabled, what's in place to provide you the capital to buy them out in that event? And also, what funding do you have available to the business to serve as a bridge? Because if you had two people or three people working together, and now you have one person who's no longer able to work, how do you keep the operating expenses covered without having some extra capital? So maybe even having insurance for the business partners. Um, Another thing to think about is taking care of your family if you have one, or taking care of yourself. If you plan to sell your business and retire, make sure that there's enough money in there for you to live on for a period of time. Don't just get excited and sell it and it's over. Like, you really need to be in the practice of knowing how much you need to live the life that you want to live. And then make sure that you build your business to be of value, so that if you sell it, then you're able to take care of yourself. Or if you pass away suddenly, or at the end of a long life, then the people who depend on you for salary, that they're taken care of. The thing that I hate seeing the most is when a business owner whose business was the sole source of income for a family, or the primary source of income for a family, something happened to them and now their family is instantly without money to be able to take care of their daily needs. And of course, we have life insurance, but there's also some business planning that needs to be in place, because um, it can be stressful for a family member to suddenly inherit a business if there's no plan, and they just one day, now they got to figure out, do I run this business? Where are the records? Where do they bank? Excuse excuse me. I'm in the midst of a cold or getting over it. I don't know where I am, but there's certain things that you do and you know what to do, you know where they are, you know who to call. But if something happens suddenly, then your family may not know. And so that's stressful, because not only are they dealing with your the loss, they're also dealing with the financial implications, but then they're dealing with, okay, what do I do with this business? Like, they had clients, they had all these things, and I don't even know what to do. So there's a lot, and so when we're doing our business planning, we have to think about, how am I going to make that revenue that I need, but then also think about, if something happened to me, do I want the business to be what provides for my family in the future, or do I have other things in place to make that provision? Just thinking through all of those different things early on, because you might say, you know what, I'm not in a position where I'm ready for my family to be solely dependent on this business if I was no longer able to work. And so you might have to have another plan in place, maybe another job or some other source of income until you get the business to a place where it's really sustainable on its own.
Now, I think you made a really good point because a lot of people are like, oh, this is my best friend. This is my neighbor. This is someone I went to school with. And they start a business together. And so they don't think about anything other than, all right, you bring your skills, I bring my skills. Maybe we both bring a few $1,000s to the table, but there is no true agreement in terms of what if there's a disagreement? What if someone no longer wants to do this, or someone gets sick or passes away? What are some of the documents or provisions that people need to make sure that they're actually putting to take care of situations like this?
Excuse me. So I would say this is not an all inclusive list. Excuse me, because I am actually in the process of developing and investigating what do business owners need in these situations. But some of the things that come to mind are buy-sell agreements. If we get to a point where something happened to one of the co-owners, or if the co-owners are at a place where they just cannot get along and the business needs to be done, what are the terms under which someone can buy another business owner out, or how do we dissolve the business in a way that's fair and equitable? Making sure that those are clearly laid out, more than likely in the operating agreement for the LLC, or if you have a corporation, you'll have bylaws. You also want to make sure that you are clear on what everybody's responsibilities are in terms of what they're supposed to bring to the table. I think sometimes we're in partnership with someone and we're just making it happen, we're making it happen. But what is the metric for you're not pulling your weight, you're not doing your part? And making sure that's clear up front, because you hate for it to happen in the midst. Like, look at all this stuff I'm doing, and you saying I'm not doing enough, when you don't have that metric to say what is each partner's contribution to this enterprise. Then you don't have that metric to say that someone is or is not meeting the mark. And so making sure that those things are clearly laid out in some kind of a agreement, partnership agreement, or in the operating agreement, or in some way, like what everybody's contribution is going to be in terms of financial contributions, things that they need to do for their personal finances. One thing that is interesting, when you have a new partnership or LLC, when there's multiple members, then banks are not going to want to lend money directly to the LLC. They don't trust you to pay your bills, and so they need to go to the people. And that's when they're going to require certain documentation from both of the owners or all of the owners. They're going to require them to provide financial statements. And sometimes that could be the holdup. Like your business partner doesn't want to share because they don't want you to know the financial mess they're in. And so being clear about that at the beginning. If I need certain information from you, you're going to give it to me, and vice versa. We're not going to have a place where we're fighting over I'm not giving this to you, or they don't need all that. Like, there's certain things that are going to be needed. And so it's good to spell that out in the operating agreement or partnership agreement, so that it's clear that these are the things we're agreeing to when we're going into business with each other.
Now, I think you made a really good point, especially in terms of debt. And so a lot of people are like, all right, well, when I die, all of this is gone. But unfortunately, that isn't the case, especially even with businesses and guarantors and so forth. And so, especially when it comes to debt, upon passing. So if you've, co-signed, or you said, all right, my house is collateral and all those kind of things, and then you pass, or maybe your partner passes, and all of a sudden the loan is called, or all those kind of things that could potentially happen. What are some things to think about that I think people are like, oh, I died, who cares? All of these things will be taken care of. All these things will just simply go away. What are some things that you've seen in that perspective of how people either have failed to plan, or how it might have impacted them in a way that they weren't even thinking about?
So one thing that comes to mind immediately is if a business owner is doing things in an informal way. For example, they might have worked out some deal over here with the particular party. I had a someone I talked to recently where their spouse was a business owner and they passed away, and there were certain contracts and certain arrangements that the spouse had made in their own name, and so the only way to get things going was to be to appoint an administrator or an executor over their estate in order to deal with those things that person committed to in their own name. And so it's important to be clear on those things. If you are a business owner, to know what things can be picked up on. If something happened to me, that my business partner can pick it right on up and jump in, or things that are really personal. And then I need to make sure that there's someone in place for me personally to be able to handle business. And this would happen, especially if the business owner becomes ill or disabled. If they don't have a good power of attorney in place, someone in place who has the authority to make legal and financial and business decisions on their personal behalf, then that can present a problem. So this is where your personal estate planning intersects with your business planning, because there's some things that as a business you can deal with through an operating agreement if you have one for the business. And so it's important to have that, especially if you're doing business with other people or if you have people who work for you. You want to make sure you have a good solid operating agreement excuse me, so that things that specifically pertain to the business are handled by some legal document. And then once you have the operating agreement in place, and this is LLCs, it could be bylaws for a corporation or partnership agreements in a partnership. So I want to make sure I'm clear with that. But if you are, and so one thing I am assuming is that you have a business structure. And that's something that has to also be addressed, that a lot of times we just go and do business. Veronica McClendon doing business as McClendon Law and Consulting. You can do that, but it intertwines your personal with your business in ways that if you have a big picture, long range view for your business, it could be detrimental in the future. Sometimes that's how we get started. But it is important that if you're really serious about this business, that you create an entity, you put it into an LLC or a corporation or some kind of entity that can manage the affairs of the business. So that's square one. And we got to make sure we have the proper entities in place. And then once we have the proper entities in place, we need the proper governing documents for those entities that address things pertaining to the business. Succession of the business. If you pass away as the CEO, how do you determine who fills your spot? Does the business just dissolve? Or is there a way to find a successor? Can they hire? Is your business at a place where they can hire a new CEO? Where they can go and recruit them just like they would hire an administrative assistant. They hire the CEO. Making sure that's clear in that business documentation. And then going back to what I was saying before about that personal estate planning, making sure that things that pertain to you are in place. So if you pass away, you need to have a will, and your will will have an executor in place who can pick up on your personal affairs after you're gone. And if you're a business owner, you might have to think of an executor who has a little business savvy, because there might need to be some things that they have to do on your behalf as a business owner until the business can be properly transferred to someone else. So they need to understand contracts and how to hire an attorney, how to hire an accountant, or whoever there might need to be hired, so that they can take over some of those things that you were doing as for your personal capacity. So it might be, I need somebody to sign contracts for me, or I need somebody who can cancel a contract for me. Even if I'm in this business, like I might not have someone in the business who can do it, so I need an executor who can do that for me. And then also a power of attorney, making sure that you have someone who has the proper legal authority to handle your business, your finances, in the event that you become incapacitated. We had a lot of business owners. I actually had several people I spoke with where their spouse or their partner came down with COVID. They were business owners. A large amount of their personal income came from their business, but they weren't deceased. They were just incapacitated from COVID or something else. But we saw it a lot in COVID where business owners, they weren't able to work because they were ill, and it could have been a permanent illness what that led to their death, or it could have been a temporary illness. where they just needed somebody who could come in and take care of things on until either the person recovered or someone could be put over their estate. But if your family does not, if you do not have a power of attorney, then there's no one who has legal authority to make financial and business decisions for you. And so, in order to get that, excuse me, someone's going to have to go to court and be appointed as the conservator over your finances. And that's where they can get the legal authority to do financial things, business things, legal things on your behalf. But that costs money, that costs time, and it also can cause a lot of stress because you might think as the spouse that you're the person who should be over your spouse's finances, but their children, if they have grown children that are not your children or even could be your children, they might think they're the best person. And so then you got to fight. You got to fight it out to see who's going to be the best person to serve as the conservator. When if you had a financial power of attorney in place, then that would have been determined by you when you were in your right mind and in good health.
I think a huge reason of why people either haven't done or haven't gotten around to it is because of cost. And so there's a cost of not doing anything, and then there's a cost of course, putting things into place. What should people be saying? Okay, this is a realistic budget to get the baseline of documents together.
Mm-hmm. So, if you're, can you see me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. My screen is is having an issue, but as long as y'all can see me, that's good. Excuse me. Excuse me. I know that's not good for the audio. I'm sorry. But so all about coughing and stuff, I lost the question.
In terms of, it's always a cost versus, pay now, pay later. But if someone is saying, okay, I'm starting the business, I know I need X number of dollars to file my LLC, I need X number of dollars to do this, X number of dollars to do that. How much should they be budgeted to say, okay, these are the basic documents I need to put in place? How much should I?
So that question is a very good question, and it's very hard to answer because there are so many options out there, and it depends on which option you take advantage of. So there are, we have the DIY approach where some people just go out there and do it themselves. Of course, that's just going to cost the registration fees and whatever fees you have to pay to register with the Secretary of State or whatnot. But then there's these legal services that you can go online and get it done for a certain price, and I don't know those prices. So that would give you like a very basic template that you can use, and there might be some customization involved. But then there's also lawyers. Some lawyers are they're kind of like they operate as a human legal, I don't want to say people's names, but legal services company online. They operate as a human version of that. So they basically will get a template, plug into your name, and there's your operating agreement. It's basically that something you could have done online, but you get a person to talk to help you through it. And then there's some who have more of a strategy approach where they're looking at it from a bigger picture. And so they are going to go in more in depth on things that you may not get from another attorney who's more so just preparing documents for you. And so then it also varies for your geographic location. If you being in the DC and Maryland areas, that's where you are, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So being in that area is different from being in Macon, Georgia, where I am, and it's going to be different from being in California. And the ranges can be so much that it's hard to say on a platform like this. So I hate that I can't give a number, but it ranges so much. And so what I do advise is that people find someone that they feel they can trust and who is going to be that trusted advisor for them as they go throughout their business journey. So some lawyers, they're going to just do enough to get you started, but then the service is in there. But some are going to be your basically like your in-house counsel in a sense, where you can call them and put them on retainer and ask questions as they come along. So I would say that it should be a decent part of your budget. especially if you are building a business that's going to go beyond you. Because if you have branding, you might need to have a trademark attorney in there. You might need to have contracts and license agreements, and there's so many different things. And so unfortunately, I'm not able to say for, what a budget would be. But I would say go ahead and ask around. Look at some attorneys that you like and that you feel you connect with, that you could talk to, and just do consultations. That you might have to pay a small consultation fee, or some may offer a free consultation. But just kind of check around and see what you're hearing, what you're finding. Because I know even for me, I was looking to get something trademarked one time, and I talked to two attorneys, and the prices were so different. I was just like, okay, like what's going on here? But it's really about finding that person that you like, making sure that they're offering services in a way that lines up with you. And then once you know how much it costs, you go ahead and budget for it. Just like getting your website done, or just like getting your office, getting your logo and your branding, your business cards. It's all part of the expense. So it's essential. And I encourage people not to let the cost or the potential cost to keep them from doing it, because the cost of not doing it can be so significant that financially and emotionally and reputation wise, that it's worth that investment. And so I'm gonna just be transparent with y'all. I need to go talk to a business lawyer for myself, because there's certain things that you look at from your perspective, even being a lawyer, that I need to go and get an outside perspective. So I'm saying this now as my accountability piece, because I actually was on a call with my CPA, and he was like asking everybody in the group. He said, so y'all, how much do y'all pay for y'all's legal fees every year? And all of us were like, we don't pay legal fees. We're lawyers. And he was like, you need to get a lawyer to do your legal stuff instead of doing it yourself. So I'm holding myself accountable with that on this call.
I think that's a really good point in terms of even helping. So you're a lawyer, so you're like, all right, I already know all this stuff, but you also know how to interview a good lawyer as well. So what
Mhm.
would be some of the questions? So you're going out, you're going to get you somebody on your team. What are some of the questions that you're going to ask to know that either this is the person you want to work with, they know what they're talking about, they're going to provide you the service and the level of information that you actually need? What are some of those questions that you plan to ask that attorney?
So, excuse me. One thing that you can kind of see before you even talk to someone is making sure that they are culturally competent. It's funny, I started using that term, and I don't know where it came from. I thought I made it up. And I was using it yesterday in another webinar. And then today I went to this conference, and this lady said, first you got to make sure that they are culturally competent. And I was like, okay, I didn't make that up. So make sure you get a lawyer who's culturally competent, who understands where you're coming from culturally, and that can understand how you might approach your business, so they can help you to identify pitfalls that someone who may not have your same or similar lived experience might not be able to catch. And sometimes it's not even about lived experience, but it's about making yourself aware. So if you have an attorney who may not look like you, they may not have the same socioeconomic background, but they have allowed themselves to become educated on what your background might be. So traditionally, the practice of law is white men, and a lot of them are older white men, and they have a way of doing business that doesn't always line up with a younger black woman. And it's not anything mean or you trying to be selective or racist. It's just reality. Like there's some stuff about the way black folks live their lives that an older white man may not understand. And so it's important that you get a lawyer who understands where you're coming from, understands what this business means to you. And so I encourage you to have a conversation. A lot of times we might think, I'm going to this person. I would tell you this. I went to a CPA, talked to a CPA one time because I was looking for a new one. And I was just like who's selling who? Because you're not really selling me on this. And I almost thought, well, I mean, but this looks good and that looks good, but it just wasn't clicking. And so you want to make sure that you really vibe with this person during your initial call, because if you don't, then there's going to be a breakdown later. So a lot of it is just that sense. But in terms of questions, I would say to make sure that they understand your industry. And I cannot emphasize that enough. I've learned the hard way trying to go to CPAs who don't understand law firms. And they're great CPAs, but they don't understand law firms. They don't understand how we have to do accounting and how we have to keep our books balanced. And so make sure you have someone who understands where you're coming from. If you are a social media influencer, the way that your legal services look is going to be different from a law firm. It's going to be different from a CPA firm. A brick and mortar is going to be different from an online business. And if they don't they need to be like, here's what you need. It doesn't need to be like I was trying to do. Well, lawyer's trust account, this is what it is, and you have to do that, and you have to do that. Can you do that? And they're like, yeah. It's like, no, I need them to be like, as a lawyer, you need this, you need that. And I'm like on this whole CPA thing because I was looking for someone, and I finally got someone who I think is gonna work. But it's like I had to learn the hard way to make sure that they understood what a lawyer's industry is like. So make sure they understand your industry and that they're telling you in that initial call what you need to be thinking about, and that you're not having to educate them on your business. So I would say that's another thing, making sure that they know your industry, and then also ask them about how they do business as a business law firm. So, or estate planning, if you're doing that, sometimes you have a business, there's people who do business law, but they don't do estate planning, and vice versa. They do estate planning, but not business. And then I'm learning for me that it's essential to do both because a lot of times people are business owners. So, making sure that they can address the different needs that you have. Um, like I said before, some lawyers, they're more so gonna fill out a form for you and make sure it meets all the legal requirements, but they're not going to really educate you or consult with you on how that fits in with your bigger business plan. And that's critical. That's really essential to make sure they understand the big picture and can help you understand the big picture. Because creating a document for me and not making sure that it fits in with the way that I'm doing business and the way I'm setting my business up, that's not going to be good. And the last thing I would say is make sure that they are providing the services that you want. Like, go ahead and think through that before you sit down. Are you just looking for someone to prepare the basic legal documents for you? Or are you looking for someone who's going to be your trusted advisor that you're going to grow with over time, that when you are in business for 15 years, they're still in business with you and you've grown together, and you trust them for their advice? Making sure that you're talking with them and just kind of getting a sense of how they see their service delivery. Are they someone who they provide a succinct, specific service and that's it? Or do they have other services that you can go to after that service is completed? Do they have the next phase available? And if you're looking for someone that you can call and ask a question, you need to get someone who has a retainer. Because I used to be in a place where people call me and be like, hey, Veronica, I had this situation come up, and it's like, well, they're past clients, so let me answer the question. But now I'm at a place where it's like, you're gonna have to get a new retainer because we're not doing that anymore. And so if you're looking for that person that you want to just be able to call, then you need to make sure that you talk with them. Like, is this a one and done situation? Or is this an ongoing relationship? How long does that relationship last? What are the things that would show that this contract is complete? Excuse me. Or what are the things that I need to do or expect to keep it going? Are you going to expect me to make monthly payments? Is it something that I get a certain number of hours with what I'm paying? Or is this a flat fee where once you do the operating agreement, then it's done? Having that conversation with them before you actually retain them.
Now, you talked about especially knowing somebody who knows your industry. Are there specific industry kind of industries that should be thinking about one thing over another? So, if you're service based, or if you're selling a product, or if you either have a partnership, are there certain things that, okay, if you're service based, you should 100% be thinking about this? going to be very either detrimental to your plan, or maybe it's something that you don't think about all the time.
Mm-hmm. So the things that come to mind are, the branding. If your business involves branding or some kind of proprietary process or proprietary information or product, service, anything that needs to be protected, then you would want to look at having someone who can help you protect your intellectual property. That might be trademark and might be copyright and other things. But a person who is more so brick and mortar and they're not really looking at branding like that, they may not need it as much. I think these days, I mean, most business owners who are under a certain age are looking at branding and making sure that their logos line up. But there are a lot of folks who that is just not what they care about. They're brick and mortar. They expect you to come in there and do business with them in person. So the logos and the trademark, the logos and the images and things like that may not be as important for them. So that's one thing. Also, if you're doing, you might be just providing your services on site without having, you're not working with other people. So you might not need contracts, you might not need leases, you may not need licenses. But if you're someone who's doing business with other businesses or other individuals, you need to have those contracts, those licenses, the non-disclosure agreements to say if we're talking about business and you learn something about mine, like you won't go and tell everybody else about it, and non-compete provisions might need to be in there. So if you're doing business with other people, you do need to make sure you have good contracts in place. And people think, oh well, if we're friends, we don't have to worry about contracts. But if you're friends, you definitely need a contract because that's where those boundaries get blurred. And so it needs to be like, hey sis, like we said 5 workshops, right? And that's it. Like there's no, well girl, I mean, when I said like I'm gonna do workshops, I didn't mean 5. I meant 2. But if it's laid out, it's clear. And there's no like, but you said it's like that's what we wrote and that's what we agreed to. So making sure that agreements are in writing and that the various things are worked out. Some people may not be in a position where they can afford a lawyer to help them write an agreement. But if you are in some position to do that, then go ahead and hire a professional so that you can really protect yourself. If you got something worth protecting. Now, if you just got some quick little thing that you won't really care about, then maybe you don't need to hire a lawyer. But if you think like this thing gonna get me out the hood, it's gonna get my mom out the hood, it's gonna get my cousins out the hood, like you need to protect it. And so it might be that before you unleash it, you work a little on your main job and save up some money to hire that lawyer. But you got to just really think about what you are protecting, the value of what you're protecting, and what you're willing to lose. Like you might say, this is important to me, but if somebody takes it or infringes upon it, it's not going to be a huge deal. But some people have businesses that they went out there and started dibbling and dabbling with the wrong people, and then that person is wealthy, and you over here trying to figure out a new business because they done stole everything. So it really depends on what kind of business you're in. Um, if you are in a business like providing personal care, healthcare services, excuse me, you might be a medical facility or a nursing home, or you're sending people into folks' homes to care for them. You're doing child care. Of course, you're gonna have to have more insurance. Whenever you're dealing with people, you need more insurance. You need various policies for your staff to make sure that they are not doing things that are illegal. You might have to hire a lawyer to train your staff. This is how we protect. Um, this is how we honor the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is how we make sure we're in compliance with OSHA. Depending on what you're doing, there might need to be some greater level of consultation. If you're doing a high risk profession, construction, or you're doing something where people can get injured, you want to make sure that you have the proper legal structures in place to protect you and your staff in the event that something didn't go the way you planned it. So it's a lot. Excuse me. I think that these days it feels like, oh, it's easy to start a business. I'm just going to do it. But there's so much that goes into it. And I don't say it to scare people, but just to say, once you put yourself out there, you're really getting out there. And so you want to make sure that you're ready. And there might be like a lot of attorneys have courses and mastermind groups or things where they'll kind of give you an overview of what you need to look out for. And so you might even look out for that to see, okay, I'm a business coach. So, excuse me, is there a lawyer who does a course on what business coaches need to know about running a business coaching firm? Just kind of do your research there to see if you can find someone who can train you on what you need to look out for, because every industry is going to have its own pitfalls and its own requirements. And so you want to make sure that you are prepared for that.
I think that's a really good point. Now, I know we're almost at time, but I wanted to get two things. So, an example of someone who did it right, and maybe an example of someone who didn't do it right, so we can kind of see the differences of how things can go either really well and transfer the way you want to, or not so well, and
Hmm.
don't transfer the way that you're hoping for as well.
Hmm. So I'm trying to think of what went right. You see so much of what went wrong.
And I think that's it's
Excuse me.
it's definitely easy to see some of these that go wrong, and sometimes those are
Mhm.
good examples to know, oh wait, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. I didn't account for this or that. Especially when you start talking about like partnerships and you're like, no, I've known this person for 20 years or known them all my life. They're like a cousin to me, or maybe they are a cousin to you or a brother or sister or whatever that might be, which can make things even more messy.
Mhm. Yeah, what some of the things that I think about that have gone wrong. Excuse me, coughing and being in this place on the webinar is going wrong. But a lot of business owners that like if someone has come to me and their loved one was a business owner and they have passed away, um, too often it's just that lack of preparation for their families. Um, a situation that I've seen a few times would be someone who was a business owner, and it's usually, it's a male business owner, and they were not married to their, they had children, but they were not married to the children's mother. And so when they pass away, then the child's mother is having to fight with the people who are more naturally gonna come in as representatives. So the person they passed away, they did not have a will, and someone needs to be put over their estate. So then it's their sister or their mother or their cousin who comes in to say, I need to be the executor or the administrator. Usually the administrator, if they don't have a will, it's an administrator, and that's usually what you see. I'm gonna ask the court to be the administrator over this estate, and we don't like her, so we're gonna pretend like he didn't even have kids. Where it's like they just left the kids out, or they tried to, hide things from the mother. Like the children were underage, and the biological family is trying to hide things from the mother and keep the child from getting what they are entitled to. The child would have been the 100% heir in that kind of situation. But the biological family, other than the child, the sisters and brothers, the moms, the dads, they're trying to keep this lady out of the picture because she ain't part of the family, or that child ain't really his. It's like that kind of stuff. And I say that not as like this was a one time thing. This is something that I saw a lot. I've seen a lot happen. Or, this is the person that you see as your partner. Y'all live together, y'all share finances, you do all these things, but you're not legally married. And if you pass without a will, this person is entitled to nothing. They could have been your live-in partner for, I would say, 30 years. I can't, there was a common law marriage at some point, and that ended a long time ago, and I can't remember when it ended. But if you weren't in that common law period, like you were just living together, according to the law, they don't see that as someone entitled to anything from you. But you may have lived just like y'all were legally married, but because y'all weren't, they get nothing. So that's the case where that person needed a will so that they can include that person who was not their legal spouse, but they could still make sure that they were taken care of. And so I've seen that happen. And it's just really hard for people in those situations to get information, to find out, they might have that minor child, to find out what is my child entitled to. They won't tell me anything. They won't talk to me. That's the kind of situation that I see, excuse me, that I really hate seeing, because often, I've seen cases where children should be millionaires, but they're living in, their mom is on food stamps because they depended on this wealthy family member. And when he was gone, it's like she ain't nothing. And the child is just out there in the cold. So that's the kind of stuff I've seen. And I know we're mostly women here, so it may not be as much of that kind of situation in terms of like you needing to plan so that your spouse and your child is provided for it. And that's because, or your significant other and your child. Like your significant other, definitely you need to make sure if you have one and you're not married, you account for them. But someone who you like really are living with your business and your finances intertwined. But if you have children, women, the law is like if you birth that child, it's yours. You don't have to fight as much as a man has to fight to show that this is his child. So it's different for men and women. But a lot of times you see it where the man has gone, and because he was not married to the mother, then she's not entitled to anything. And then somebody has to prove that the child is entitled to something. Um, if he hasn't gone through the legal process of legitimation and things like that. So that's a situation that I've seen where, those are situations that I've seen where things have gone wrong. Um, I do look forward to the opportunity to work with with people who things went right. They did all the planning and the
But they
families.
said they don't need anybody. By then, they're like, I already got everything set up. I know what order things are going to go into. They have somebody that they're working with. They're like, you don't see that.
Yeah, I mean their attorney will still be involved, but it's just a very straightforward. I have seen it with just regular estates where someone had a will and they left their house or they left their bank accounts or cars. It might have been multiple houses where they left that in the will. But significant like a business or something that's like very complex. I haven't seen those situations where it's like, oh, there's a proper succession of a business owner. Like I haven't personally handled those, but like you said, they have their people who set it up for them, and those people probably handle it for them. And I've just seen a lot of the cases where things haven't gone right. And I think, a huge part of that is not really to fault anybody, because Black people haven't been talking about wills. And I said Black people and people of color here in the US haven't been talking about wills until recently. And I heard a statistic. I need to like find the actual number where they said like the number of African American families or adults who've gotten wills over the past 2 or 3 years has like skyrocketed. Like the awareness is coming and we are going out there and getting our wills. But for a long time, we either didn't know where to start, we didn't have lawyers who understood us, we didn't have lawyers that we trusted. And so we weren't in a place where things were not done properly. But now we're getting out there, we're doing it a little more. And that's comforting. It's exciting to see that that's happening.
Our own wealth. I think that's a good thing. So we know that
Mhm.
things are changing. So I'll say this one last question. So what should people do? So today, somebody's like, all right, I need to get my stuff in order. Hadn't thought about all these things. What should they do when they leave today to say, all right, I'm gonna find somebody to do this, this, and this? What are those 2 or 3 things that they need to make sure that they get done by the end of October, maybe by the end of this year? What are those things?
So one thing is to, take some time excuse me, take some time out. This is water. That might help. Take some time out to think about, what do I own? What am I building? Who am I building it for? what purpose, what long range goal do I want to see? And just really take that time with yourself and think about it. And a lot of answers would come just from taking that time. Like when you sit and think, like, okay, at first I just wanted to be a business owner. I started my business, I got going. But now when I'm thinking, I'm like, I got little children. Do I have somebody in place that if something happened to me, that they can raise them and carry on the values that I have? Is there someone who can handle their money? My sister may not be good with money, but she good with kids. And I'm not being specific. But it's like you might have somebody who's like your sister who's good with kids, but they're not real good with money. So you might have to have a guardian for the kids and then a trustee for the kids. But really thinking about what am I building? Who do I need to account for as I build? What kind of provisions do I need to put in place to make sure that these people are taken care of? Just taking that stock is a good thing. And then also the inventory, really sitting down and thinking about what do you own, what's important to you, what's of value. And that's something that when you work with an experienced attorney, they'll be able to help you to create that inventory and to assign valuations to it and help you understand the value of things and what implications there excuse me, may be considering the values. Um, so that's something that you can start, but you don't have to like do it all the way because you'll have help when you hire the right attorney. Um, so that's something, and then also just start researching. So I will say, here in Georgia, McClendon Law and Consulting is happy to help. But if you're in another state, you can also you can reach out to us because we have access to a database of attorneys that we're building of attorneys around the country that we refer to each other. So it could be that, I'm in New Jersey and I don't know who to work with, and I have a few in New Jersey that I would recommend. Um, so, you can reach out to us, and me or a member of my staff would be happy to recommend someone in another state if it's not, someone in Georgia. But find that person who you feel like you can relate to, you can trust, you can talk to, and someone who is going to have your best interest in mind. To just start thinking about that. And I would say, like, if October is estate planning awareness month, um, and so there might be a law firm that if you're doing your estate planning that will be offering a special. At our firm, if you retain us, then we will apply your consultation fee toward your services if you end up retaining us. And there are other firms that are doing their own specials for estate planning awareness month. And it might be that you just go and get started, and then it might still be a few weeks of you getting things together, but just getting started, sitting out and having that initial conversation can at least get you in the right direction to start working on your plans.
I think that's huge. Hopefully, everybody is like taking notes and getting started. I think that's the biggest thing is just get started. I mean, it's like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, I'm gonna do this later. But to at least make a call, check in with Veronica's network and say, all right, do you know somebody in my home state to see if they can help you as well? And that cultural awareness goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we refer to family members, things that we find very important, things that we are like 100% they got to be taken care of. Like we got to account for that. All those things are important. So I want to thank you for being with us tonight, Veronica. Hope you feel a little bit better. And I thank you everyone for joining us today and reach out to Veronica. Her information is in the details as well. So if you need her, reach out. And then I hope to see you all again for another great Money Monday. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.